There are many questions facing the printed word in this digital age. Is there a future for the printed word? The magazine industry is facing the biggest change in its history, and folks are looking for answers. The future of the printed word in a digital age was the theme of the ACT2 Experience that was hosted by the Magazine Innovation Center at the University of Mississippi. We tried to answer the question about what's the future of magazines and the printed word as a whole in this digital age. Experts from all sorts of the media world came to Oxford, Mississippi and offered their opinions and advice about the future of the magazine world. We've asked those experts 3 questions. Question 2, what advice would you give to someone who comes to you and say, I would like to start a new magazine today?
Be ready for a rough road ahead. It's not an easy thing to do. I think there are 2 things that I would say about starting a new magazine. One is it needs to be relevant. It needs to be relevant to an audience. It needs to be something that people pick it up and they feel like it is speaking directly to them. So whoever your audience is, the magazine that you are putting out is totally unique. It's something that they feel like they can't get anywhere else, and it feels relevant to their lives. The other thing I would say is that it needs to be differentiated. It needs to stand alone on its own, apart from all of the other publications that are out there. It needs to fill a very unique niche. And as long as it's relevant and differentiated, I think you're off to a promising start.
Do it. I've started dozens of magazines and newspapers, 6 or 7 on my own, 6 or 7 or more for major publishers. There's always room. Even if you don't make it, you will have a world of experience that cannot be replicated anywhere else. If you want to learn how to be a businessman, become a businessman. Even in failure, you learn how to not fail the next time. I would and do encourage anybody around me, and I meet a lot of people, to start it. Start it online, start it on paper, it doesn't matter, do both, do it. If you've got a good idea, it'll float.
Just do it. Do it, but don't forget, you need a vision and you need a business model. And be careful. Your business model has to be, try to think it out of the box. I mean, the new business model is not out there yet. So you got to tailor your own one. And I'm positive you will be able to do it.
I think it's the same advice that's worked forever. You know, find an audience that, you know, where there's an opening, a niche where you can, you know, super serve that audience. Make sure that you have service for the reader that they're looking for, and ultimately those 2 things, I think, you know, will help you launch a successful magazine.
Well, I'm the queen of starting new magazines, and I think the one thing that you have to do when you start a new magazine is know exactly what niche you're filling in the market, or know that there is a segment of an audience that is not being reached with existing magazines. You have to be a voice of authority, and you have to know which audience specifically you're targeting.
Well, it's more challenging today. On the other hand, I think there's probably less competition. You know, years ago, average doesn't cut it anymore, not just in publishing, but other things. In magazines, there used to be average writers, average readers, average editors and average publishers. Average doesn't make it anymore, so you don't have as much competition. So if you have a good creative idea, I think you have a better chance for your cream to rise to the top.
I think the most important thing is to know the audience and know where they are, know where they reside, and try to do a little research on that before you go into it. I think there's a lot of good ideas out there, and I think that the important thing is just to go do it and to go and start the magazine, because you never know until you sort of get into something like a magazine, a media property, what it's going to do for you. But most importantly, I think I do a tiny bit of research going in just about audience and making sure you're reaching the audience, because that's how you're going to monetize. and it's a business venture at the end of the day. So I would not overlook that.
To start small but think big. You know, it's okay to start on a shoestring budget. That it's okay to start and try to grow organically while you get your footing and figure out exactly what you're trying to do. You know, we certainly started small and didn't spend a fortune trying to fine tune the idea of the magazine. But even on a very small budget, you can start a magazine.
The first advice I would give is, yes, do it. I'd be very positive about it, but I would then ask them to be very realistic about it. And to be realistic, I would say you need to start small, research it, make sure you know what you're doing, make sure you're loving what you're doing, and don't pour all your money into it. Treat it as a small project and watch it grow.
You have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing, and make sure that you just don't figure out what you want in the magazine, but figure out, are there people out there who actually want it? And spend some time writing up the marketing for it and making sure that it's something that people will value. And then charge a real price for the magazine. Don't give it away, because the only way that you know that people value it is if you actually ask them to pay for it.
I think the first thing is that you really have to focus on the edit, but then at the same time you have to focus on the business side. How are you going to make it survive? So if you create this living, breathing thing, how do you give financial life to it? And that has to be done either through circulation, which we talked about, or advertising, which is what I do. So if that's true, you need to do a competitive analysis. You need to take a look at it from a business side. I look at hundreds of new magazines each year, and it's amazing how little people spend on the business side. They spend a lot of time and money on the editorial side, but don't think through the business side.
Believe in what you're doing. Don't listen to the naysayers. And particularly if you're asking for a small startup magazine, think small to start with, not in terms of your concept, but in how you go about trying to build an audience. Work with bookstores and try and find ways of building subscriptions, but you're probably going to have to start with newsstand.
Well, if you start a magazine or a print, another print extension, the only advice I can give is do it from your heart. Do really what you think is very good, and really let your heart speak when you make it.
I wish I had someone answered that I had asked someone that question before I got involved in journalism. I think the thing to do is to get involved in something that you're passionate about. I mean, pick a subject that you really care about, and assume that if there's you who's excited about whatever it is, blackberry picking or baseball or whatever, that somebody else in the world, that there's an audience out there that wants the same kind of information that you do. And I mean, how much money you need, how do you find a printer? It's easy to those questions can be answered fairly easily, but really do something you think you're going to love. I think that's really the key thing.
Don't do it. No, no. You know what? I think it's great that people still want to start magazines, and having launched a number of magazines and talking to lots of people at this conference, it is very motivating to see how many great new ideas there are and how many great new concepts there are that can manifest as magazines. So the advice I'd give is, follow your passion, and if someone, is creating a magazine, it's because they've discovered an aperture in the marketplace, that there's something there there's a void, and that's where the great ideas come from. They come from a void that someone has a vision for and says, "Wow, wouldn't it be cool if there was this magazine for that group or that community, or for those passionate individuals?" And the opportunity to create that and fill that void and build a business around that, there's probably nothing more exciting. So, I think for anyone that wants to do that, my main advice would be make sure that they've done the reconnaissance and the due diligence to know that there's a real marketplace for that. that there will be receptivity from the end user or the reader or whoever they're trying to reach out to, you know, with this new product. The same way you'd market any new product. But, you know, aside from that, we heard today about a new magazine that was launched for $10,000, and they gave it a shot, and now it's, you know, 7 years later, and it's a successful magazine. So, you know, it does take some resources, but if you do the right due diligence and the concept really resonates, you know, people should absolutely go for it. And it's probably, in a way, the barriers of entry today are even less, because it doesn't have to be the traditional magazine. You know, you can do it, you know, using technology in a way that is much less expensive than launching a traditional magazine and thinking you need to do the direct mail and put it on newsstand. You know, there are ways to kind of seed the whole concept of something new by putting it online, creating e-newsletters or some type of communication that may be in conjunction with the magazine, the printed magazine. So it creates a new opportunity for young people and maybe entrepreneurs to think about magazines in a very different and a much more positive way. That they can do it and they don't have to think it's not feasible because I'm not a big publishing company. And the innovation doesn't come out of those companies typically. Most of the magazines that are launched and created they're started from grassroots, great ideas that somebody believed in.
Generally, the mistake, you know, for all the intricacies and how important it is to have quality everything, the biggest mistake people make starting a new magazine is they don't have enough money. And it's such a capital-intensive business that takes years to pay off. And a lot of magazines go out of business, not because they aren't great magazines, not because they don't connect with readers or any of that stuff, it's because they don't have the money to grow. You know, I think people think of starting a magazine as like, you know, something that's fun, you can get to do it, but it's more like building a giant building. You know, you kind of can't get halfway there and start renting it out. You know, it's going to take a while before that generates money for you. So I think people really, it's great to print it out and show your friends, but if you're serious about making it a business, you really have to have enough money to do it.
What advice do I give the first advice I give someone wanting to start a new magazine is don't. Because the only way you're going to create a magazine that is good enough, that's focused enough on the audience, that has enough soul, is if you're willing and intent on doing it despite people telling you not to. So I think the most important thing is someone's got to be willing and have that urge to create a magazine despite people telling them they shouldn't do it. Because all the best magazines beforehand, they shouldn't succeed.